In The Bold and the Beautiful, catastrophe rarely announces itself with spectacle. Sometimes it arrives quietly, folding a life inward before anyone realizes what has been taken away. That is how it happens with Will Spencer, not in the middle of a feud or a headline-grabbing scandal, but in a moment so ordinary it feels cruel in hindsight. 1 second he is standing, talking, existing inside the fragile normalcy his family has fought to preserve, and the next he is on the floor, his body betraying him with a finality that leaves no room for denial. The collapse is sudden, terrifying, and irrevocable. By the time the tests return, the truth lands with the force of a slap. The illness is not only serious, it is chronic, complex, and demands long-term treatment that will reshape every aspect of his life. For Katie Logan, the diagnosis erases the world outside the hospital room. Boardrooms, contracts, brand disputes, and legal maneuvers vanish from her consciousness as if they never mattered. The Logan name, once a banner she defended with precision and resolve, becomes irrelevant in the face of a single, overwhelming fact. Her child is not safe. Katie's response is instinctive and absolute. She freezes everything. The brand war stops mid-stride. Meetings are canceled without explanation. Press inquiries go unanswered. Legal strategies that were, by every objective measure, winning are abandoned without hesitation. To the outside world, it looks like retreat. To Katie, it is survival. She does not frame the decision as sacrifice. She does not dramatize it or seek validation. She simply vanishes from the battlefield because there is no battlefield left that matters. Will's condition requires relentless attention appointments, specialists, treatment plans that stretch indefinitely into the future. Every hour demands presence. Every decision carries weight. Katie's life collapses inward, narrowing until it contains only hospital corridors, medical jargon, and the constant, exhausting effort of holding herself together for her son. Power, once a tool she wielded with confidence, becomes meaningless in the face of helplessness. But in Los Angeles, absence is never neutral, and Brooke Logan sees it immediately. Brooke does not experience Will's collapse the way Katie does. She feels concern, yes, even genuine fear, but those emotions coexist with something colder and far more strategic: awareness. Brooke has survived too many wars to mistake silence for stability. She recognizes a vacuum when it opens, and she understands instinctively that vacuums invite occupation. Katie's disappearance from the brand fight creates an opening so precise it almost feels designed. The Logan dispute, once stalled by Katie's relentless focus and emotional clarity, now hangs suspended alive, unresolved, and vulnerable to redefinition. Brooke does not move impulsively. She never does when the stakes are this high. Instead, she watches. She listens. She waits just long enough for Katie's absence to register as pattern rather than pause. Then she acts. Her first step is not public, not confrontational. It is intimate. She brings Ridge Forrester into the conversation quietly, framing the moment not as opportunism, but as inevitability. Brooke speaks the language Ridge understands best: timing, legacy, and the danger of unfinished business. She does not argue that Katie is weak. She argues that Katie is gone, and that companies, like empires, do not wait for grief to pass. If the Logan brand dispute remains unresolved, it will rot. If it rots, it will take value with it. Brooke positions action not as betrayal, but as stewardship. Ridge hesitates. He always does when family and power collide. He knows what Will's illness means. He understands the gravity of a mother stepping away, not because she lost interest, but because she lost certainty. Yet Ridge is also a man shaped by momentum. He has seen fortunes shift in moments like this, seen silence weaponized by rivals less sentimental than Brooke. When Brooke suggests that waiting could be just as cruel as acting, Ridge listens. The third piece of the triangle is Carter Walton, and Brooke knows exactly how to engage him. She does not appeal to ambition or rivalry. She appeals to process. Carter is a man who believes in frameworks, in rules that exist to prevent chaos. Brooke presents the situation as a procedural necessity. With Katie absent, decisions must still be made. Files must still be reviewed. Legal timelines do not pause for personal tragedy. By the time Brooke finished laying out the logic, Carter is not conspiring, he is complying. What unfolds next is not a dramatic coup, but something far more unsettling, a meticulous excavation of loopholes. Brooke does not challenge the Logan brand head-on. She does not need to. Instead, she directs Ridge and Carter to re-examine the fine print clauses that hinge on active representation, deadlines that assume engagement, provisions that allow reconsideration if one party ceases to participate. It is legal, it is clean, and it is devastating. The case is not overturned, it is reopened. Katie, absorbed in hospital life, does not see it coming. Days blur together for her in a haze of exhaustion and vigilance. Will's treatments are aggressive, their side effects brutal. Katie learns the rhythm of machines, the language of charts, the particular look doctors get when they are trying to be honest without being cruel. She sleeps in chairs, eats without tasting, and exists in a state of suspended breath. When updates from the outside world trickle in, she dismisses them reflexively. There will be time later, she tells herself. There will always be time later. That belief is the lie Brooke counts on. The cruelty of Brooke's strategy is not in its intent, but in its precision. She does not attack Katie while she is strong. She waits until Katie is depleted, until every reserve of focus, anger, and resolve has been redirected towards survival. Brooke understands something deeply uncomfortable about power. You do not have to defeat your opponent if you can simply outlast them. Time, wielded correctly, does the work for you. When Katie finally becomes aware of the reopened brand maneuver, the realization lands like betrayal layered on grief. She is not furious at first. She is stunned. The energy required to be outraged no longer exists. She feels something worse, erosion. Brooke did not steal victory through argument or brilliance. She took it through endurance. She waited until Katie could no longer fight. The confrontation, when it comes, is quiet and devastating. Katie does not accuse Brooke of malice. She accuses her of knowing exactly when to strike. Brooke does not deny it. She does not apologize either. She speaks calmly, almost gently, about responsibility, about momentum, about the impossibility of freezing an entire world because one family is in crisis. Brooke insists that she did what Katie could not or would not do. She kept moving. This is where the true horror of the moment crystallizes. Brooke is not wrong in a legal sense. The system allowed her to act. The timelines permitted it. The loopholes existed long before Will collapsed. And yet, there is something profoundly inhuman about winning this way. Brooke has not defeated Katie's argument. She has defeated Katie's capacity. Ridge, watching the fallout, feels the cost settle into his bones. He sees the look on Katie's face, not anger, but depletion, and understands that something irreversible has happened. This is not a rivalry that can be reset. It is a wound that will scar every future interaction. Carter, too, recognizes the shift. He followed procedure, honored structure, and still finds himself complicit in something that feels deeply wrong. The rules were obeyed. The outcome, however, tastes like ash. Katie does not lash out. She cannot afford to. Will needs her too much. Instead, she absorbs the loss the way she absorbs everything now silently, internally, with a resolve that borders on numbness. The Logan brand dispute fades into abstraction. What remains is the knowledge that while she was fighting to keep her child alive, someone else was fighting to take advantage of her absence. That knowledge changes her permanently. Brooke, for her part, does not celebrate. She never does openly. Victory, for her, is not about triumph, but survival. She tells herself that she did what had to be done, that business cannot be governed by compassion alone. Yet even she cannot entirely silence the awareness that she won not because she was right, but because she endured longer than a mother in crisis possibly could. The season closes on a bitter truth that no one speaks aloud. The most ruthless battles are not won with strength, but with patience. In The Bold and the Beautiful, power does not always belong to the loudest voice or the strongest argument. Sometimes it belongs to the one who waits while another bleeds and steps forward only when exhaustion makes resistance impossible. In The Bold and the Beautiful, the most devastating attacks are rarely delivered face-to-face. They are whispered, timed, and repeated until they harden into consensus. This is the terrain Brooke Logan understands better than almost anyone: a battlefield where outrage is unnecessary, where power is exercised through implication rather than accusation, and where a single well-placed headline can accomplish what a courtroom never could. As Katie Logan disappears into the fluorescent purgatory of hospital corridors to save her son, Brooke does not need to shout to be heard. She only needs to speak softly to the right people at the right time. The campaign begins invisibly. There is no press conference, no statement, no overt challenge. Instead, fragments surface in the margins of business coverage and social commentary, phrases attributed to sources close to the situation, observations framed as concern rather than criticism. Katie, the narrative suggests, is overwhelmed. Katie is panicking. Katie has gambled everything on the Logan name and collapsed under the weight of her own ambition. The language is careful, almost sympathetic, which is precisely what makes it lethal. Brooke does not accuse Katie of incompetence outright. She allows the audience to reach that conclusion on its own. What makes the strategy so effective is timing. Katie cannot respond. Her world has contracted to a single room, a single bed, a single fragile body that refuses to behave as it should. Will Spencer lies suspended between hope and fear, his treatment consuming every ounce of Katie's energy. Days blur into nights, nights into days, and the idea of monitoring media cycles or countering speculation feels grotesquely trivial in comparison. Brooke understands this. She knows that silence, in the public imagination, rarely reads as dignity. More often, it reads as confirmation. Each time Katie forces herself into public view to reassure donors, to thank supporters, to explain why her presence has been scarce, Brooke's machinery hums a little louder. Images of a mother at the hospital are reframed as evidence of instability. Interviews meant to advocate for Will are recut into narratives about distraction. Headlines do not need to lie. They simply need to juxtapose. Katie Logan fights for son as brand questions mount. Emotional strain raises concerns about leadership. The implication is clear without ever being stated. A woman who cannot compartmentalize her grief cannot be trusted to lead a company. Brooke's genius lies in restraint. She does not attack Katie's love for her son. That would be monstrous, and Brooke is far too skilled to make that mistake. Instead, she weaponizes that love. She allows it to become proof that Katie's priorities have shifted irreversibly. In Brooke's version of events, Katie is not wrong for choosing her child. She is simply no longer capable of choosing anything else. Leadership, Brooke suggests through proxies and planted questions, demands emotional distance. Katie's devotion becomes disqualifying. Behind the scenes, Ridge Forrester watches the narrative take shape with increasing unease. He recognizes Brooke's fingerprints even when they are carefully smudged. He hears the familiar cadence in the commentary, the way concern is used to soften judgment. Yet Ridge hesitates. He tells himself the press would have found the story anyway, that speculation is inevitable when a leader vanishes without explanation. He rationalizes his silence as neutrality, even as he senses that neutrality itself is a form of consent. Carter Walton is even more conflicted. As Koo, he understands optics, understands how quickly confidence erodes when leadership appears absent. But he also understands context. He knows why Katie is gone. He knows the human cost behind the headlines. Each article leaves him with the uncomfortable realization that nothing being reported is technically false and that makes it harder to challenge. Brooke has not distorted facts. She has curated them. Katie, meanwhile, experiences the campaign only in fragments, filtered through well-meaning friends and staff who try and fail to shield her. A nurse mentions seeing her on television. A donor asks if she plans to step back permanently. Each question lands like a small betrayal, not because it is cruel, but because it reveals how quickly perception has shifted. Katie begins to understand that while she has been fighting for Will's life, she has been quietly losing her own. The cruelty of Brooke's approach is not just strategic, it is psychological. Brooke understands exhaustion. She knows that sustained stress erodes not just strength, but clarity. Every article, every whisper, every insinuation adds weight to Katie's already unbearable load. Brooke does not need Katie to concede publicly. She needs her to falter privately. Doubt, once seated, does the rest. There is a moment brief, devastating when Katie considers responding. She drafts a statement asserting her competence, her vision, her right to lead. But as she reads it back, the words feel hollow. They speak to investors, not to her reality. How does one defend ambition when ambition feels irrelevant? How does one project authority while sitting beside a hospital bed, praying for numbers to stabilize? Katie deletes the draft. Silence, she decides, is the only honest response she has left. Brooke anticipates this too. Silence becomes the final piece of evidence. The narrative tightens, crystallizing into a story that feels complete. A woman who reached too far, collapsed under pressure, and vanished when things became difficult. That Katie's disappearance is an act of love rather than weakness is immaterial. Public stories rarely honor nuance. They reward simplicity. The brilliance and the horror of Brooke's campaign is that it never requires her to appear triumphant. She does not posture as a victor. She positions herself as a stabilizing presence, a familiar figure who understands the demands of leadership and the cost of distraction. In contrast to Katie's absence, Brooke's consistency becomes reassuring. The question shifts subtly from "is Katie capable?" to "who is steady enough to replace her?" When Katie finally confronts Brooke, it is not with anger but with a kind of weary clarity. She does not accuse Brooke of cruelty. She accuses her of patience. Brooke does not deny it. She speaks calmly about perception, about responsibility to stakeholders, about the impossibility of pausing an industry because of personal tragedy. Brooke insists that she did not create the narrative, she merely allowed it to surface. That distinction, flimsy as it is, provides Brooke with moral cover. She did not push Katie down. She simply stepped forward when Katie stepped away. The confrontation ends without resolution because there is none to be had. Katie cannot reclaim time she spent at Will's bedside. Brooke cannot unring the bell of public doubt. The damage is already structural, embedded in perception rather than policy. Even if Katie returns tomorrow, fully present and fiercely determined, she will do so under a cloud that did not exist before. Brooke has shifted the frame, and frames are notoriously difficult to dismantle. As the storyline settles, the audience is left with an unsettling truth. Power does not always belong to the one with the strongest argument or the purest motive. Sometimes it belongs to the one who understands timing, optics, and human fatigue. Brooke's campaign is not loud, not dramatic, not even obviously malicious. It is simply effective. And that is what makes it so chilling. In The Bold and the Beautiful, betrayal is often passionate and explosive. This one is quiet, almost elegant. Brooke does not scream. She does not accuse. She waits until a mother is too exhausted to fight, then allows the world to decide what that exhaustion means. It is a push delivered with a headline, a judgment passed without a verdict, a victory achieved without ever having to raise her voice.